Welcome to the QuickByte Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Klinger. Today, I have an incredible guest, Elizabeth Dixon. Elizabeth is an entrepreneur, a speaker, an author. She has led hospitality and culture in one of the most amazing companies on the planet, one of my favorites, Chick-fil-A. She is an incredible human being. Elizabeth, it is a joy to have you on the QuickByte Podcast.
Well, it is an absolute honor to be here with you and to celebrate recent awards that you have received within the business and your leadership. I know from Chick-fil-A, you're one of those partners that is the best of the best. So it's an honor to be here with you.
Well, thank you so much, Elizabeth. And we've had Elizabeth speak to the Comcast Business All Hands meetings. If you're looking for a speaker that can lean into culture and the mindset that you really need as a business to grow, not only grow from a revenue standpoint, but grow as human beings and grow in that elevated mindset of what does it take to be successful? And Elizabeth has a lot of nuggets of wisdom to share. So shameless plug for Elizabeth and her speaking engagements, because she poured into us and we've been better for it at this big Fortune 29 company called Comcast. And we think the world of Elizabeth, so highly encourage you. I believe you've got a website that people can reach out to you and connect, right, for your speaking engagements. Let's go ahead and plug that, Elizabeth.
I love it. Yes, ElizabethDixonSpeaks.com. Also, ElizabethDixon.com is out there too. But either of those are great and have lots of information on topics and books and all kinds of resources.
Awesome. And speaking of books, so The Power of Customer Experience. Tell me just a little bit about that. Give me the genesis behind that book that you've written.
Yes. The genesis behind it is I felt that there was a need for the frontline employee to really understand the power they have in customer experience. There are amazing resources for strategy and thinking about it from a business development perspective. But what about the frontline employee? Recognizing the way they create an experience with the customer, that's where it's made or broken. It's not made or broken in the theory level of talking about it. So the tone and heart was to give a resource for the frontline employees that could help organizations be the best in customer experience when the whole organization was aligned.
That's awesome. And then you've got The Strength of Purpose. Tell me a little bit about that book.
So that one came after about 12 months after The Power of Customer Experience. And I had about 15 folks who read the book and gave me feedback, helped me find gaps, what didn't make sense. And I asked that same group, I said, what's next? And we started to talk about how the statistics are that over 75% of people can't articulate their purpose in life. And I think that's so critically important. And I found myself in my 30s without words. I knew the essence, but I couldn't put words to it. And when we're in hard times, when we're in confusing times, when we're overwhelmed, when we feel like, how did I even get here? When something happens to us that we didn't expect, those are moments when we really realize, wait, what am I doing here? What is my purpose? And so I wanted to have a resource that would help people put words to it so that they could weather those storms. They could weather the trials. They could weather the seasons of feeling stuck or stalled or stressed on a place of purpose and actually come out the other side stronger.
I love that. And that's a great segue into the 10 questions that I ask every guest on this podcast, because at the end, and we actually get to the what is your why on question 10, but the build up to that question is really the layers, right? And that's the goal of the podcast, is to take incredible leaders like yourself and kind of peel back what each layer is that makes you who you are and gets you to that purpose. So let's dive into question number 1. What's the best piece of business advice that you've ever received?
Well, that's a big question because I have been poured into by a lot of incredible people. But one that I've been thinking a lot about recently is something my dad gave me. So he was the CEO of a flight training organization and a very type A kind of guy. And the advice was, it's the second decision that counts. And coming from someone like him, I felt like that sounds like a cop-out. You know, he's such a strong leader. Isn't it the first decision that counts? Like nail it the first time. But he would always tell me, Elizabeth, a mistake is going to happen. It's either going to be something you cause or it's something you inherit. And either way, it's the second decision that counts. You select someone that's not a great fit for the job. What do? It's the second decision that counts. You're going to say something that comes off the wrong way. It's the second decision that counts. And in customer experience, we're going to make a mistake. An order is going to be wrong. It's going to take too long. It's going to go to the wrong location. Like something is going to happen and go wrong. What do we do with that moment that counts? And that advice has showed up for me in business, but it also shows up for me in my personal life, in my friendships, as a mom, as a wife. Like, I'm going to make a mistake, but what am I going to do in that moment? And it's the second decision that counts.
Yeah, that's sound advice. I love that. What are the top 3 qualities that every leader should have?
Mm. I think a deep sense of care. I think you can tell when a leader really genuinely cares about you, and that care creates safety. I think vision, if there is no vision, the people perish. So I think leaders have to be able to cast vision. And maybe they're really good at it naturally, or maybe they're not, and they surround themselves with support to be able to put that vision together. And I think also being a developer of others, like being that safe guide that helps lead others up and helps people grow more because they were, working with that leader than if they weren't.
Yeah, great advice. We have a young audience that listens in, and these are folks that are, thinking about their career path. We also have folks that are in a role, but maybe they want something more and they want to get into that elevated leadership role. What is the pathway that you believe someone can take to become a leader?
Mm. I mean, leader is kind of an interesting word because I think a leader means that people are following. But I think a lot of times in culture, we say a leader is like position. They have people reporting to them. I think it's more of the first. And so we get to be leaders, whatever our title or position is. Or if we're in a season where we're not working, we still are a leader. Clay Scroggins has a great book called How to Lead When You're Not in Charge. And I think that it has really great tips and resources for how we can choose to lead today. Like what is within our control? And then how can we be that safe guide for others? How can we show care to others and help lift them up, help them get where they're wanting to go from A to B? And in doing that, we're living out and embodying leadership, whether we have a title or direct reports or not. And actually, if others are following you when they don't have to, then that means that you're even stronger as a leader because people are choosing to follow you.
That is a great perspective and a lot of truth in that you can lead where you are. Just because you don't have the title doesn't mean you can't lead. And someone was telling me about 360 leadership. It's really just being where you are and you can lead up and down. And sometimes it's a benefit not to carry the title, you
Yes,
know? And,
totally.
and so you can influence in different ways. So let's dive into faith. Faith is very important, I know, to both of us. What role does faith play both in your business life and your personal life?
Mm. It's the center and core for me. I find the days that I wake up and I remind myself of my beliefs, of my faith, the things that give me hope, then the rest of my day is different. My circumstances have nothing to do with it, but it's that I'm grounded on the things that I know to be important and true. And sometimes I don't know about you, but I feel like a goldfish. Like my attention span, it's like I can so quickly forget the things that are most important. And so when I center myself on that in the morning, it makes all of the difference. So what role does it play? It's central to who I am. And then my hope and my prayer is that it shows up in my interactions. It shows up in how I respond. It shows up in how I navigate the hard things, how I navigate failure, how I navigate stress, vulnerability. It shows up in my words. And ultimately, then it creates an environment around me that allows people to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel heard, and to feel hope that we say a lot, the best is yet to come, but that there is a brighter tomorrow. And so that's my hope is that ultimately what grounds me and centers me creates a positive impact on those around me.
Yeah, and that's the way that I look at it too, Elizabeth. And there are days that I fall short, like we all do, because we are in the process of sanctification. But I heard this great preacher out of it's Bayside Community Church in Bradenton, Florida. When we used to be in Florida, we're now back in Tennessee. But my son was down there playing soccer for IMG Academy, so we found this amazing church. And Pastor Bernard was talking about when you have that anchor of hope in God, and you're centered in the Word, and you're centered in your life in Christ, that when the storm is blowing around you, people look over and like, why aren't you tripping? He said, he's like, why are you so calm when it's all falling apart? And I would love to stand before you and say that every day I get that right. I don't. Sometimes the human elements of me come out, but it does bring me back to center, and thank God for that anchor that we can have.
100%. I agree with you. It's in those struggles that it gets amplified. And I also think it gives us courage to go and risk and try and be willing to push for big things and big ideas and bring people along. And that causes people sometimes to say, like, where does that courage come from? How can you so confidently move towards the unknown? But when we're centered on a place of faith, knowing that our worth doesn't depend on our progress or our worth doesn't depend on our performance, there's an openness and a willingness to to step forward, to do more, and then to weather the storms when they come.
You're exactly right. And there's power in the eternal perspective
Yeah.
to know that we're all living between the dash, and the only thing you can take to heaven are people, you know, and so when it really kind of makes things that seem huge in the moment, it makes them go, you know what, in the big picture, probably wasn't that important in getting worked up over. So
100%.
yeah, yeah. So let's go on to the next question. Who has had the greatest impact on you professionally and why? Everybody struggles with this question because there have been so many people. What I've found, Elizabeth, is that great leaders often have had a community of great people pouring into them. It's rare that just one person has made an impact. But if you want to, pick one person to talk about, feel free to share.
Okay. I'll talk about one recently. For the past few years, Dan Cathy, working over at Trilith, it's been a vision that's come to be these last 10 years. And it's the largest soundstage in North America, which is amazing, with a town adjacent to it. And then I get to lead the foundation, which is focused on enriching the lives of creatives. So pouring into the creative industry, whether it's film or art or music. And two things that have really, really resonated with me these last few years. One of them is he often says that someone is living your dream, go learn from them. And I honestly used to be a person 20 years ago that would say, oh, I have this idea and no one is doing it. It's unlike anything before. And I look back on my 20-year younger self and I'm like, oh, that's really sweet. I understand the passion behind that. But the reality is that somebody is doing some aspect of what you ultimately want to go do. And there's a lot that you can learn from them. So for us, when we're building and developing a new aspect of Trilith, we're going out and visiting 2, 3, 4 different places who are farther ahead than we are in that space. And we're taking pieces from what they're doing, being inspired by it and going, okay, how can we apply that in what we're doing? I saw someone put a quote that said, wise people learn from someone else's tuition, I think it was. And I was like, oh, that's so good that when we can come alongside and learn from others that are already doing a thing, then we get to grow, with them. And when it's not always our own tuition rates. The other thing that I've learned so much from him is his ability to cast incredible vision and then get very into the details. So one morning, it was really early and I had gotten to Trilith and the streets were quiet except a few gentlemen were sweeping the cobblestone streets. And in between cobblestone is this more finely ground gravel per se. And I was admiring them as they're sweeping. And all of a sudden I hear, Elizabeth, Elizabeth. And it was Dan. And I look over, he said, come over here. Well, Dan was over there with him, sweeping with them. And he was showing them the right proportion of gravel to have in between the cobblestones. Because if it's too much, the tires don't quite create the special sound. But if it's too little, it's extremely hard to walk on. And he knew what it needed to be. And there he was explaining and showing, this is it. And then he taught me. He's like, come look. Like, this is how you get it just right. And so I think learning from others, being a continual learner, and then also being willing to both cast vision and get into the details personally are things that have had a huge impact on me and the leader that I want to continue to grow into.
Man, I love that. That is going to be such good content for folks. I wish I'd have learned that years ago myself. That is great. And, it makes me think of my son who's always coming up with ideas and then he'll go Google it and somebody's already thought of it. But I tell him, keep aspiring to those things, keep dreaming,
Yes.
pursue
And
it.
there's always opportunity that we can put a different twist on something, but it doesn't mean that we don't want to learn from those who are already out there doing part of what we dream to do.
Yeah, that's a big takeaway, I think, is that it doesn't mean you have to say, well, somebody else figured it out, so I don't have to pursue it. Like you said, you could build a better mousetrap,
100%. There's a company that I've grown to know called Rhone, RHONE. It started with men's athletic wear, but Nate, their founder, one of the tensions he found was Lululemon had exceptional products for women, but he felt like some of the men's products weren't quite as masculine as what he wanted for the gym and working out. And now they have a women's line. They're 10 years old. They're a large company. I think they have like 15 or 20 storefronts. I mean, they're amazing. And I think that it's an example of it's different. There's enough space. There's enough room in the athleisure world for multiple companies. And he didn't just copy paste Lululemon. He took the industry, the space that he wanted to serve of athletic wear and said, let's do it just a little bit different. So often there is room at the table for the idea you have. It's just don't think about it in a vacuum. Like go learn from others and let that help accelerate your growth and not instead kind of stay stunted.
Wise words. I love that. Who's a company you admire and why?
I think Roan and Nate, I think they've grown healthfully from, what I can tell and understand. And their leadership is phenomenal. Nate's been a mentor to me with Slumber, our sleepwear brand. And I think leaders that are willing to pour into others it says so much because, if he's willing to pour into me outside of the company, the culture he's creating, pouring into his staff and his people and developing them is going to be 100 times that. So they're definitely, and I got to go spend a day with them in Connecticut. They're in New Canaan, Connecticut is where their offices are. And I got to go spend a day with them in January. And they were so inspiring to me. They're, 9 years ahead as a brand and, way farther ahead as terms of volume and growth. But they poured into me, gave great advice, said, hey, let us know what any questions you have. That abundant mentality it breeds loyalty that a company is not going to be closed off, but they're willing to share and grow together and learn. I think that says so much about their culture.
So I have to make an editorial comment here for the audience. For Elizabeth Dixon to say that there is a company that poured into her and inspired her, they're worth looking into because Elizabeth made a great career at Chick-fil-A pouring into companies that would come in from around the world Chick-fil-A would conduct these hospitality workshops, and Elizabeth would stand before these great leaders from great corporations to share that leadership mindset and hospitality vision and cultural, things that would make Chick-fil-A who they are as a world leader in care and in their respective industry. And for Elizabeth, who I know has spent years pouring into others, to say that you were inspired, that's a big deal to me. That's huge. So, and also tell me about your brand. I mean, just again, a quick plug for your sleepwear line. So tell me about Slumber. Like how do people find it?
Yes, lumbersleepwear.com and on Instagram too. We're in a few stores and hotels, and then most of it's online. But it came out of attention that I was having a hard time finding sleepwear that I felt was cute for my husband, comfortable for me, and modest for my kids. And the future vision I had remembered a lot of moms wearing when I was growing up was like a muumuu, like this big blousey dress situation. And I was like, no, I don't want to become old. And so my husband just challenged me and said, hey, do something about it. And a friend in the industry introduced me to a pattern maker and a bunch of cold calling. We found a fabric mill in California. And 3 years later, everything is made in the U.S. and supports about 6 small businesses. And it's the softest fabric that I've ever felt in my life. And it's all milled in LA and then cut and sew factory is in LA. And it fits that middle ground of it keeps you young, keeps you comfortable, keeps you cute, and you can have young kids running around the house or, girls' weekend or, ski trip with another family. And you don't feel like you have to put on a big old robe or wear your Lululemon stuff around. You can be in your PJs and be modest.
Well, I am sold. I'm going to be a customer for my wife. I will buy some today. And of course, we're filming this today. It may not be released for a little bit, but we're filming on Valentine's Day. So what a great gift idea, gentlemen and ladies, treat yourself to this incredible, nice, comfortable attire, which is good. Thank you for sharing that. So let's dive into something a little bit heavier topic. Tell me about a time that you've overcome adversity and what did you learn from it?
One thing, there's a bunch of different situations that come to my mind, but one has been a longer growth for me. And it has to do more with the adversity that can come in my own mind and the story that I tell myself about myself. Someone has said before that that's one of the most powerful stories that you tell is the one that you're telling yourself in your own mind. And I was spending some time with a young gal that I work with in this season of life earlier this week. And we were talking about, did she feel like her potential was fully optimized? And she said, not really. And I said, well, why? And she said, sometimes I'm afraid to speak up. And I said, oh, tell me more. And immediately as she starts talking about it, it took me back about 15 years ago, where I'd sit in a meeting and feel like I had something to share, but I felt so like I lacked the confidence to put words to the idea. Or as this friend shared with me, I feel like my ideas all need to be groundbreaking in order to share them. And I feel like that challenge, it shows up in different ways. It might not be the struggle to share something, but it's just the confidence to be authentic and to be yourself and to be open-handed and to share an idea without holding to it that it has to be the idea that's used, or it has to get a round of applause, or it has to get someone to encourage us in it. And it could be of like thousands of different ways. But for me, that was mine that really held me back. And one of my mentors, who's still at Chick-fil-A, I remember talking to her about this and saying, how do you do it? You just have this effortlessness that you lead with, and you're in these meetings and you throw ideas out and you move things forward. How do you do that? Because it feels like anxiety in me. And she said, Elizabeth, I view it as just moving the ball forward. Like the things that I'll share or the way that I'll help facilitate, it's all about just forward progress. And it's not about me. It's actually never about me. And that was a mindset shift that I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that I felt like I was making it about me. But seeing that it really is about progress, and it's about others, and it's about moving us toward a common goal. It actually changed my comfort level in showing up as myself. So there's plenty of external adversities that come where other people are doing something towards us or towards me that come to my mind. But that was one that was an adversity in myself, that growing in it actually helped me handle the external adversities differently, because the internal side was more calm, had perspective, was more rooted and grounded in the things that mattered. And then the overflow became, out of that, of how I would respond or react or, move things forward, just as this mentor had told me.
That is so beautiful what you shared. And I think that is at the heart of what I think most people in today's world feel when it comes to anxiety, like you mentioned, or depression. And it really comes from a root of self-defeating belief systems that people carry. And so they listen to this lie, and they've had functional MRI studies that show the brain has this proclivity towards negativity, and the brain matter just lights up. And when you're thinking positive or saying things in faith or believing in yourself, that it's very little that lights up in the brain, which is quite interesting. And it's that fallen nature, I think, of man, and what you're saying though really shifts to perspective, like you said, off of me and more to, we're just moving the ball forward. It's okay to take a risk. Part of life is fail and wins and losses and success and all these things. So that is so beautifully articulated. That's actually going to make a great short. What you just shared, that is so good, Elizabeth. So thank you for that perspective. I think for me personally, there's a lot I could take out of that. Let's dive into something a little lighter now. We're getting into the back of the questions here. So what's a fun fact about Elizabeth Dixon that people may not know? And if you want to break some news today, feel free to share it.
Wow. Let's see. A random fun fact is I got to go scuba diving in the Atlanta aquarium. As a gift to my dad, we bought an experience to go scuba diving in the tank with the whale sharks and the stingrays and manta rays and all their largest tank. And it was the coolest experience. I did tell him, I was like, Dad, this is for like Christmas, Father's Day, your birthday, all the days for probably a few years, because it wasn't the most affordable experience, but it was so incredible. And I highly recommend to anyone that's looking for a memorable experience. The Atlanta Aquarium, and probably many aquariums across the country, offer really cool in-person experiences with the animals that you'll never forget.
And do they feed them before you get in the tank, or?
No, I didn't ask. But the whale sharks, fun fact, the whale sharks, they like eat plankton, so they're not going to come after you. But they do tell you you have to get down and equalize really fast. And I've never been the best at equalizing. And that's where, your ears have to adjust to the pressure under the water. But they said if you don't get down and the whale shark's coming, it will feel like a bus hitting you. And I distinctly remember going into the water. And I mean, it was probably 50 yards off, but it felt like 5. And I was like, trying to get down under the water as fast as possible, regardless of if my ears hurt. Because I was like, I don't want to get hit by a whale shark today.
That's so wild. I had no idea that you could do that. I'm assuming they gave you video and photos and everything from the experience. So maybe you can share that with me some other time. I'd love to see that. That sounds incredible. So how much time do you dedicate to unwinding, and what do you like to do to unwind? What is that place for you that just helps you get regenerated? And I know that you're a person of faith and the time in the Word, but what other things do you like to do for fun? But when you're not in a tank full of sharks?
Well, John, my husband, has challenged me for a while to get a hobby. He said, I don't have a hobby. I was like, work is my hobby. That is my hobby. But recently I've picked up golf. And I would say the thing that I do to unwind, I would say my motivation for unwinding, being very transparent, is being mom and wife, that I want them to get the best of me, not the rest of me. And so when I get home, it's like a whole new day begins for me. And so what we've learned works really well for our family is just playing. So we've been playing a lot of basketball. We play a game called knee ball, which is like a mix between soccer, but on your hands and knees with a little Nerf ball. It's good for the colder days. And then we've started adding golf in there too, even if we go and play just a few holes and that's it. And just being outside and playing, it helps my mind focus on something else. And it helps me be really present with the people who matter the most to me. And then that fills my tank up. Just that activity of being together and doing something and being physically active actually feels like unwinding for me, as crazy as that sounds.
No, I can totally relate. I'm the same way. For me, doing an activity, especially an outdoors activity, I also like golf. And matter of fact, I have a call with the CMO of Top Golf because I did a little fundraiser for Giving Kitchen at Top Golf, and they caught their attention and they're like, hey, we should talk, So I'm like, okay, we'll see if something comes of that. But for me, it's that getting active and being there. And I love what you said, for my family to get the best of me, not the rest of me. That is, I'm going to take that one from you if you don't mind.
It's hard. It gets hard sometimes if we misplace our energy, then we find ourselves waking up or going to bed at night being like, I just feel this tension that I'm not giving the people that mean the most to me what they need. And that was a paradigm shifter for me to start and finish my day with a different kind of giving of energy so that I did feel like my priorities were focused on and, everything could move forward. And it's not always perfect, but in general, trying to keep that balance.
Yeah, that's great. Well, we've reached the end of the podcast here, Elizabeth. Going to ask you the question number 10, which is building up to all of this. And that is, what is your why? What drives you?
So my why I discovered just a few years back before writing the book, and it is to reflect Jesus by galvanizing people and ideas for good. I love to come alongside people and really cool ideas and move them forward. And that word galvanizing, it means something to me. That's just a natural thing that I love to do. Cheering people on, helping equip them, get them resources, connect them with others, believe in them, get them started, whatever that looks like. And ultimately, I want that to be in a way that reflects my relationship with Jesus, which gives me all of the hope and all of the joy that I have in my life. And it's ultimately my reason for being.
Amen. Amen. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. What a pleasure it has been to connect with you and hear your story. And I know it's going to be a blessing to many, many people. And again, check out her website, engage her for her clothing line, her books, her speaking engagement opportunities. I can assure you, she will absolutely make a big impact on your teams and leave you better than she found you. So again, Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us on the QuickByte Podcast, and take care.
Thank you.
QuickByte Podcast is proud to shine a spotlight on Giving Kitchen, an incredible nonprofit serving the food service community in times of crisis. From unexpected medical emergencies to natural disasters, Giving Kitchen steps in when life takes an unexpected turn. To learn how you can help support those who serve us every day, visit givingkitchen.org. And while you're at it, subscribe to the QuickByte Podcast, where leadership meets heart, and join us in making a difference, one episode at a time. QuickByte Podcast. Bite-sized conversations, big-time impact.